I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tracy Kozloff. I'm here from the State Engineer's Office. Our office also supports the Colorado Groundwater Commission, which is the entity that sets some of the rules around water use here in this part of Colorado. So I'd also like to recognize a couple members of my staff who are here. If I could have Chris and Joanna and Chris stand up. If there's any questions as the evening goes on or after the meeting, feel free to ask questions of any of us. That's what we're here for. There's some more seats up here at the front, folks. Some more people are coming in. There's agendas and surveys on the table as you walk in. I'd also like to recognize, it looks like we have some members of law enforcement here tonight. The sheriff is here, and I'm not sure who else. I can't see well enough. Thank you for coming. I don't think we're going to need your services tonight, but thank you for being here. Are there any elected officials here tonight? Do we have any county commissioners or at the back? County commissioner? Thank you for coming. We might ask if we could give you the key to the building at the end of the night as well. One of you guys, so thank you. Okay, well, great. I'd like to start off, if we can, just by reviewing the agenda. It's up on the screen behind you, but also you might have grabbed a copy on your way in. So the first thing on the agenda is the purpose of this meeting. We're here for a public meeting to gather feedback from your community to provide the Colorado Groundwater Commission as they consider beginning a rule change process for the Southern High Plains Groundwater Basin. So that's what we're doing here. Our staff isn't going to make a big presentation tonight. We're going to keep our remarks brief because the whole purpose of tonight is to get an understanding of your thoughts around the Southern High Plains Basin and convey those thoughts to the Groundwater Commission. So it's not going to be a lot of us tonight. It's going to be more of you all and your local community. So I am going to take a few minutes here at the beginning just to review the current situation and again why it is that we're here. And then after that, the second item is for the petition group to come up and state their reasoning behind their request for a rule change to the designated basin rules. The third item will be the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District. They'll be describing their position on the rule change request, and I know that they do have a presentation here on the PowerPoint. After that, we will open up the floor to anyone else who wants to voice their opinion. I'll ask, for folks to keep that pretty brief, maybe just keep it to a couple minutes, but we have a mic here right at the center of the room for members of the public, or you're welcome to come up here to the podium and speak. And then lastly, again, I mentioned the survey. We plan to collect these surveys from you all and just provide copies of every survey that we collect to the Groundwater Commission. And we'll also be writing a memo as staff based on our understanding of what we've heard tonight. I should also point out on your agenda here, there's two images. One is just a map of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District. So this red outline covering most of Baca County and into Powers County, that's the area of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management, the Southern High Plains Designated Basin. And so when we're talking about a rule change, we're talking about rules that would apply to this red area, the entirety of the Southern High Plains Designated Basin. So anything located outside of this red outline is not going to be affected by any rule change that the Groundwater Commission might undertake. And then on the other side here is this QR code, and there's also a link. And that would just take you to a folder that's full of some resources. A lot of you might have been here in 2021 when we did a meeting in this room. There was a presentation about the physical and legal status of groundwater here in the Southern High Plains. So that presentation is located in the folder through this QR code. There's other presentations. There are studies from 1967 and 2002 about the groundwater here. The current rules of the Groundwater Commission. So we tried to put in there information that might be useful to you all as you think about, your resource, which is the groundwater here in your local area. So, if you want to learn more, there's a lot of resources there in that folder. So, but I said I wouldn't talk too long. I do want to thank you for coming, and staff of the commission, we'd like to say you're welcome for bringing you 2 snowstorms on the 2 earlier dates when we were supposed to have this meeting, and thank you for your patience. Glad that the weather held out for us today. All right, so why are we here tonight? We're here because a group from your community has requested a change to the designated basins rules. What would that rule change do? Well, currently new well permits may be issued for uses like irrigation and municipal use, but the requested rule change would stop the issuance of new permits. There is no change proposed for small capacity well permits. Those are the types of permits that are for wells that supply your house. So there would be no change to these small permits, but to the large capacity permits that would put a moratorium on any new large capacity well permits. The request for a rule change went to the Colorado Groundwater Commission. This is a statewide body that makes decisions about groundwater use, in particular in this area. The Groundwater Commission needs to decide if they want to move forward with a process that will consider the requested rule change. The Commission would like to better understand the desire of the local community regarding ongoing well permitting. Staff of the Commission are here to do our best to collect the local community's input regarding moving forward with a process to potentially change the rules. Since we're here to collect your input, I would like to direct you to the existing information. I already pointed out that QR code. The information was covered in greater detail back in 2021 when we held the previous public meeting in this room. So I'm not going to go into great detail about that tonight. But when we were here in 2021, we discussed that the groundwater in the area is being used faster than it's being recharged. This is based on the scientific studies from 1967 and 2002 that I already mentioned. On average, the groundwater levels are dropping in this area. The 2002 report completed for the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District suggested that at the rate of pumping, the proven aquifer had a life of 56 years. The report also described there was an unproven lower portion of the Jocham aquifer that if used would extend the aquifer life to 100 years. But accessing the lower groundwater may not be economical for irrigation purposes. The 2002 report also makes a number of management recommendations that you all might be interested in considering. That's just the extent of the legal or of the physical status of the aquifer that I'm going to summarize. If I could turn to the legal status, it's statute and rules of the designated basins that allow for new well permits to be issued, even as groundwater levels are dropping. But the Groundwater Commission can start a rule change so that new well permits will no longer be issued. The Commission can also consider proposed rule changes that restrict new well permits according to specific criteria. So in other words, they don't need to pass a rule that is a wholesale closure. They could consider a rule that has certain restrictions that isn't a wholesale closure. Or they could just continue with the rules as they are and continue to issue new well permits according to the current rules. If the community wants to move forward with a rule change, the process requires effort and attention to detail. Paperwork needs to be submitted in a certain timeline, and it needs to answer certain questions. A group requesting a change needs to submit clear reasoning for the requested change and needs to pay attention to the steps of the process. This is a legal process. Just asking for a rule change is not enough. There's going to be work to be done. A request for a rule change is supposed to include a statement of the scientific rationale justifying the proposed rule. Although there was a request for a rule change, it was not accompanied by a statement of scientific rationale. Community members should be aware of the requirements of the process and ensure that they're meeting the requirements if they want to be successful in any type of rule change process. So, in conclusion, the facts are that water levels are declining. I think here tonight we're going to be hearing some opposing viewpoints about a rule change. I believe the petition group is asking for a change so that no new well permits are issued for those large capacity uses like municipal and irrigation. I believe that the local management district has a different point of view. And I can't speak for them. They're going to come up and speak for themselves. You know, I think the Groundwater Commission is a statewide body who is not local here to your area. We have one commissioner who's local to your area, Tim Hume. Here, yeah. We have one local commissioner, but the rest of the commissioners are not local to your area. I think the commission would be happiest if there would be a consensus direction coming from your community. They want you all to make the choice for what you want to do with your resource. They would like to hear from you. It's difficult if there's opposing viewpoints from this area, because then we might just find ourselves in a legal process where you have a hearing officer and then the commission deciding what to do. So, you know, we're going to collect these surveys from you all at the end of the evening. We're going to write down what it is that you're saying. I want to stress that the surveys and what you're saying here is not a vote. That's not how it works. There's not like a majority rules. But I think it would please the commission most if your community might be able to develop a consensus approach. If there's any hope of, you know, collaborating and coming to a consensus and telling the commission what it is that you would collectively like, I think they would be most happy with that. And that might not be possible. I just want to suggest that to you all as, you know, if that's a possibility, even if it takes some time, that it might be time well spent, you know, to be more the, in the driver's seat, I guess, of what is best for your community. But again, that might not be possible, and I'm not really sure, you know, what do you all think about that? But if not, if consensus isn't possible, the commission can move ahead with considering the current request for a rulemaking or some different proposal of a different change in rule. So with that, that was all I wanted to say to you all as introduction. I think, you know, I'll move along on our agenda, which is for the petition group and then the local district. I think the best way to approach this is to probably hold our questions until after agenda items 2 and 3, after the petition group and the district have made their points, because maybe they'll answer some of the questions that you have. And then after that, we can turn to questions and, you know, other people who are here to provide their input. So again, thank you for coming, and I'm not sure who it is from the petition group who was planning to speak. That there's going to be 3 of you all. Okay. So, Sam, are you going first? Or
no, I'm going first.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Hello, I'm Diana Touche, and I'm located between Springfield and Lamar. I'm about 17 miles south of Lamar, right off of 287, a mile and a half, and I live right on Clay Creek. And so much of the land that I own has numerous wells, of course, and then and they're all stock wells. There's no irrigation. And so there's 3 creeks that run through my property, and which would be Clay Creek, South and North Mule Creek, and Cat Creek. And then there's tributaries also. So there's been lots of water on the property, and I paid a premium for the property when I bought it because of all the water. And so nobody helped me make those no payments. I did that myself. And so one of my wells has gone dry. And so we've done a lot of work to it, tried to bring it up, and then we do all this work, and about the time within 30 minutes of getting it pumped, it quit. So about the time that started happening, I noticed that my springs, of which there are many on my ranch, because of all these creeks, began diminishing. And they diminish in the spring, when the irrigation starts. So the water table goes down when I need the water most for my cattle and all the wildlife as well. And then in the fall, when I don't really need the water for my cattle, the wells go back, the water table comes back up. So I'm concerned with, and so I'll just give you an example. The LG Holdings Group, of which members were out-of-state speculators, many of them, but there were some locals too. They purchased land in southeastern Baca County and also in Oklahoma. They applied for permits, which the Groundwater Commission granted. Then LGS Holdings, the group, flipped to the Chinese-owned group, which is Greenland Developers. They bought the land in lots, which is, that's a hard one. I don't get that. And Gang Hu is their president and CEO, and he invests and controls up to $9 billion for the Chinese. So that's my concern. Thank you very much for your time. Have you got any questions while I'm up here? I'll answer them, just ask me.
I prefer we can hold questions until after the presentations.
Okay, well, thank you.
Hello. I'm Sam Tillman Smith. Live on some property north of town. I want to welcome you to this community get together and talk over some of these issues that have been around for a while. Well, recently they've been discussed openly, such as this discussion we'll have tonight. I have recently started to object. I didn't know I could object until a little while ago, but so recently I started to object to people applying for new high-capacity water well permits in this area. And the last Groundwater Commission meeting, I was soundly put in my place by the lawyer arguing in favor of those seeking the permits. I'll tell you, a little squeak I did make, plus these other objectors have brought these issues to light, as witnessed by this meeting here tonight. Close the Southern High Plains Basin. Like all the other surrounding basins are closed. And I'm sorry, I can't afford to hire a lawyer to spar with this guy. So if you close it, then I don't have to spend any more money on these objections anymore. I'd appreciate that. But regardless, the water is going away, and chances are that it's not going to come back anytime soon. And this meeting tonight is really about how rapid that going away will be. Given my situation, sometimes I wonder why I even should be concerned with these issues. You know, in my Reaganomic spirit, I'm pretty sure my 2 domestic wells, have enough water for me, for whatever little now I have left. I don't have any cyclones. I don't know, just something to do, I guess. the families here, with any thoughts of the future, should start bothering about closing this basin. And the wisest, first bothersome step to take would be to close this basin to these high-capacity irrigation wells. In defense of my position, I would like to make a point that may not be really well understood about the geography in this area. Baca County is about as high as it gets anywhere in North America, along this particular longitude. It's a little hump in the earth, and it has its own watershed. The water went away from the artesian wells long ago, and from Bear Creek, not so long ago. And it's just a matter of time when the water goes away from the aquifers, which are also higher than the other county's aquifers. And I wouldn't count on a replacement plan. With the well perforations and whatnot, the Baca County aquifers may be somewhat connected and could help replace other lower aquifers because the water will only seep down. The Dockham aquifer around Campo has some water in it. But its replacement plan may be due to the Ogallala and some of the other aquifers seeping down to it. It is a bit lower, geographically speaking. Closing the basin will only be the first step, though. Fresh water is too valuable a resource to let people just use as much as they want, free of charge, or only costing whatever it takes to pump out of the ground. Fresh water is valuable enough to demand a price paid for its use, and that will require meters at each source. And not just high-capacity well meters, but my domestic wells, windmills, and even hydrants watering lawns and cherry hills. And if done properly, every source of water west of the 100th meridian. Because this water stuff isn't just a Baca County thing. Fresh water has become an issue all over the globe. In my opinion, doing something and erring on the side of caution will be better than doing nothing at all. And doing something is not really, we're not really coming after your water. We're coming after our water. Because that water is everyone's right. And those thinking that allowing these billionaires to buy up all these water rights is a viable solution, they're still living in the 19th century. Did Russia run through their aerial sea faster than we ran through the Ogallala? And if I were Egyptian, I would be very concerned with some Tanzanian saying that Nile River water was his water and not my water. And wouldn't it behoove Nebraska's Air Force just to blow every dam up on the Platte River rather than build some kind of canal? I mean, what's up with these canals anyway? California doesn't need one. They have an ocean. All the water they need or want. Well, we don't. You don't. That's all I got to say.
Glad to see so many people here. I've got a little bit different opinion. I think there's enough water here to keep irrigation going for quite some time, but we have a real need to start conserving that water. I think there's places that should be allowed to have new appropriations. I think there's other places that shouldn't be allowed to have new appropriations. And I think there's probably enough data now from drill records that you can tell the difference between an area that has water, enough to support a well, and an area that doesn't have water. You know, when I was a kid, that was 60 years ago. That was a long time ago. Oh, and by the way, I'm not Pete. Anybody's wondering. Don't hire me to do your plumbing. You won't be satisfied. But when I was a kid, 60 years ago, I used to mound up these, at 7 years old, I'd mound up the dirt and get it about that tall, and then I'd make a little lake. Then I'd use my finger to make a little ditch down around the mountain, and then I'd go to the windmill, get a can of water, and then I'd pour it in the lake and watch that water go around the mountain down into the field. It was a lot of fun. I never thought about, when I was 7 years old, what would happen if I went to the windmill and there was no water there. So it's kind of a reality that we need to be thinking about. Seems to me that our purpose tonight should be to extend further into the future how long the groundwater supply lasts. I know that the 2002 report says that there's 56 years of economic life left. But that doesn't mean that, and that was 21 years ago. So that means there's 35 years left. Okay, that means that because at the bottom of the aquifer, it's uneven, you know. So there's going to be water here. When you're going to have water here when water starts running out over here. So I think it's probably 20 years from now, there's going to be large areas start running out of water. By the same token, there's probably going to be large areas that will last more than 35 years. I handed out a sheet of paper. I didn't get near as many copies made as I should have. I handed out a sheet of paper that says there's 16.2% of the water, of the recoverable water, left as what there was in 1967. That means that at one time we had 6 gallons, now we have 1. Now that should get everybody's attention. So I believe there's areas that should be allowed to have new appropriations. And I think, I told the story about making a little water in the little mountain and the lake and the little field. That's because I think irrigation is great. I think irrigation is good. Let's keep this irrigation going as long as possible. And in order to do that, we need to put in some conservation measures. At this point, I should say that there is water below the first 200 feet of Baca. It's been largely unexplored. Nobody really knows how much water there is. Most people won't be able to afford to go down and get it because it's, for the most part, 500 feet below the ground. Now, if corn goes to $10 a bushel, I think there's probably going to be a lot of people trying to get water, and maybe that'll work. We just really don't know how much water is down there. So, the piece of paper that I handed out, I believe the math is correct. I don't know whether or not the reports are correct. Is the 67 report correct? Who knows? Is the 2002 water report correct? All I know is they're a lot smarter than I am, and they were trained how to do surveys, and they were trained in the art of finding out how much water there was. So, I think we have to pay attention to it. Now, a lot of you are thinking that if we stop new allocations, that the price of land is going to go down. And for some people that may be true. But what happens 25, 30, 35 years from now when the land that you've left to your children runs out of water? I think that's going to cause some economic pain. So, I want to assure everybody here that I am a capitalist. I'm not a laissez-faire capitalist. And I tell people all the time that if tomorrow we discover 5 mines of gold, there's gold everywhere. I don't care if there's only 3 people end up with all the gold. But water is different. Everybody needs water. Now, we probably need to talk about this drought. It's been a long time since it snowed good. It's been a long time since it rained very good around here. And of course that's contributing to the whole thing. One of these days it'll start raining again. Believe it or not. And what I want to do is give the aquifers the single, there were 5 or 6 aquifers. Now it's considered a single aquifer, which is fine, which is great. And I am in favor of mining the water. In other words, lowering the level of the water. I'm in favor of that. I just don't want to lower it so far that you don't recover it from it, to some extent at least. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add to that.
So nobody said or said anything about the Ogallala aquifer being dry, which it is. And so the water is bleaching up from the Baca and the Cheyenne and what's the other one? The what? The Dakota. Into the Ogallala. And that's the areas that Jack is referring to where people should be able to drill new wells. Anyway, the point is, it's dry. All that pure, clean drinking water, done. It was ancient water there. No more. So, I think we should do as Jack suggested and till it. We need to close that basin so that it can recover. So that our grandchildren have something to look forward there to in their lives. And that's it. Bye.
Thank you. I think time for the district. Come on up. You're welcome to do what you want with the mic here.
All right, well, I just got a little something here that I think Tim will take over. Thanks, Tracy.
All right, most of you probably know me. I'm Blake Gorley. I'm representing the board of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District. Like first I'll say, Jack, I appreciate your comments. I certainly understand your concern, and I think that's probably a concern a lot of people have. But I would, and echoing what you said, I believe you said you did not want to close the basin, and that would be the position of the board of the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District.
I want to partially close it.
You want to partially close it?
Some areas should be allowed. Some areas where the there's enough water to support new allocations, that's fine.
Sure, I understand that. So the issue at hand right now, the petition or proposal would be to completely close the Southern High Plains Basin to new appropriations, which would include irrigation is getting a lot of focus, but that's going to include municipalities. I know several municipalities in the district have had water issues, and they need new wells, and that's going to be a problem. That would include feed yards, any feed yard that wants to come in here, any feed yard that wants to expand. They got to have water to do it, and that would basically prevent that. It's going to include any kind of industry that would be looking to put in a high capacity well. And so, for that reason, the board of the Southern High Plains thinks the closure of the basin is not an appropriate action. In fact, not really an appropriate discussion. We think we're here to represent the personal and economic interests of everyone in the county. And when you take high capacity wells out of the equation, we don't have people left in the county. We've got a small number of people left that's gonna take an economic toll on every single person in the county. From the people that think they don't rely on any high capacity wells. People that just think they're running their cattle out there. Well, are you running your cattle on corn stalks in the winter? Are you stretching your grass with corn stalks or milo stalks? Do you grow your calves ever on wheat pasture? That was all watered with high capacity wells. Not all of it, maybe not all of it. That's a misstatement. There is dry land around here, and recently it's been exceptionally dry land. So I haven't seen a whole lot of that pasture on dryland corn stalks or dryland wheat recently. So, how did we come to our position? We reviewed the McLaughlin study from 2002, which does indicate that there is an adequate saturation within the Baca aquifers to support an open basin. We think there are places within the district, within the basin, that are largely unexplored, and which speaks for the document itself, largely unexplored, but looks to contain an incredible amount of water, in fact more than the overall Cheyenne and Dakota put together ever did. So we think that any decision to close the basin would be a drastic and permanent one. But like I said before, we understand that people are concerned. And I think a lot of those concerns are coming from some serious misinformation that's going around the community right now. And we've got a presentation that we've prepared that takes not opinions of where the water goes in the spring when the spring doesn't run. Not opinions of whose well is causing my windmill to pump less, whatever. We've taken research and study information and put it into a proposal or a presentation that Tim Hume's going to come up here and show you guys. And our position is that the information through these studies supports an open basin. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Blake, and thank you, Tracy, and appreciate the folks from the Groundwater Commission staff coming down and putting this meeting on. I think it's clearly needed by the group of folks that's here, and look forward to seeing the results from the polling that we're gonna be doing. So, as Blake pointed out, we've put a presentation together largely from that 2002 McLaughlin study, because that's the most recent data we've got, and is a good solid study conducted by folks that, as Jack said, know a lot more than I do, and he. They're trained in the art of it, and I think we can rely heavily on their conclusions. So the basin, I think it's important for all of us to take a look at the map here and understand where we are and aren't, and who should be involved in this discussion and who should have less involvement in this discussion. And I think those of us that live within the basin are certainly going to carry a much larger weight, and should carry a much larger weight with the Groundwater Commission than folks that don't. You know, the big concern of Chinese people coming in and buying land, you know, I'm concerned about people that are outside this area telling us what to do with our water. Mr. Shea, you, at the recent Groundwater Commission, claimed to live in the basin. We both know that's not true. You should have a much lower weighted opinion than the rest of us that do.
Can I respond to that, or do I have to wait?
She speaks for me.
I know that the Ogallala is not under me, but there's water there and it's coming.
Mr. Shea, do you or do you not live in the designated basin?
No, as far as I know, I
thank
don't.
you.
But there's water on my property, or there always has.
I didn't interrupt your presentation. Please
But
don't
I
interrupt
didn't
mine.
make pointed accusations that you
You accused me of drying your springs up.
No, I didn't accuse you. I just said that's what happens. But I would like to know how you got on the Water Commission. Did you get a petition that nobody's seen, where you had to have 16% of the community's signatures? Nobody's seen that. Did you advertise in the newspaper you were going to do that? And why are you up there?
Yeah, if we could just continue with the presentation.
Okay, well, he brought it. He's the one who brought it.
Because I think it's important to point out the folks that are going to be subject to these decisions. And you are not one of those, Mr. Shea. I'm sorry. You're not going to suffer the consequences of any decisions made about this basin. It's the folks that live within it that will. And therefore, they should have a greater weight in deciding that. I feel for your problems, but they are completely relying on the Arkansas River Basin and not related to the Southern High Plains Groundwater Management District or the basin.
Well, it's not a problem because the aquifer's dry. The Ogallala's dry anyway.
Man, we continue to mistake things. The Ogallala aquifer has 170,000 to 200,000 irrigation wells in it over 8 states. It is not dry. Is it dry? Does it have less water in this area than it used to? Yes, I agree with that. But we should
Well,
stick
the
to
Dockham
facts.
is leaching up, but it's
The
way
debate time is
deep.
later, man.
Who can afford to pay for 500 to drill 500 foot to get a stock well?
So I'd like to talk about the proposal that the petition is backing. As you see here, we're prohibiting new high-capacity wells, not only for irrigation, but for municipalities, for dairies, for feedlots, for any type of traditional economic development that's come to this area. It's going to stop those in their tracks. They would have to find a way to work around some existing well and get the use changed, perhaps. I don't know. That's going to be a real challenge. Again, prohibits new municipal wells. We know we've got some towns that have got very old wells that are very shallow and need to be replaced with new high-capacity wells. This would prohibit that. And it's going to prevent the development of the new water resources of the Dockham Aquifer, which is as was pointed out, is a largely unexplored, largely untapped source of water that could potentially take us 100 years in the future, doing as we're doing today. I'd like to just have a few comments about some of the statements the petitioners made, because I think it's important to know, and everybody can judge them on their credibility as you can judge me on my credibility by what I say. but the petition that was presented, that it was really not an acceptable form that was presented to the Groundwater Commission, had over 80% of the signatures were from folks outside the basin. I want to be clear on that. There are signatures from people inside the basin, but I feel very comfortable in saying over 80% were outside the basin. Many of the signatures were from Lamar, from Wiley, and those folks aren't going to be impacted by any decisions that's made in this basin. It's the people who live in this basin who are going to be impacted by those decisions. And I'll say here that I've been told that folks have been taking this petition around and saying it's a petition to save agriculture in Baca County. I think that's clearly misleading. Well, all right then, the folks at the sale barn are where I got this, sale barn in La Honda. That's what they were told this petition was. So, if you don't believe me, Mr. Shea, you can take it up with them.
I took the petition there, and I did never tell anyone that. That's a false representation.
Did you or did you not misrepresent it? The second most recent Groundwater Commission that you were a resident of the basin?
I don't know if I did or not.
You answered
But
yes when
I'm
I
telling
asked you.
you, I experienced what I've experienced. There's water there, and now it's going down when the irrigation starts. So that's the point.
All right. Well, I was at that commission meeting, and you did say you were a resident of the basin.
Well, maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't know.
So I think delivering some facts to the debate, I think, is important, and we tried to make our presentation primarily on that. The Baca Aquifer, this is from the Flosser 2002 study. The Baca Aquifer contains up to 16 million acre feet of water. At current roughly 80,000 acres of irrigated land underneath the basin, that would take us roughly 100 years into the future. That is, and the difference between Jack's numbers and mine here, and this is a table directly from it, and I'm not saying that Jack's were wrong, they just didn't have all of the information there. He didn't include the 9.6 million acre feet at the lower right corner of potential dock and water that the study was not certain about, but believed probably exists.
But it's mostly 500 feet below the water, top of the ground.
Some of it is, yes, it's deeper water, I agree. At this point in time, it is economically.
I said that during my presentation.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. At this point in time, I will tell you that's economically viable to extract and irrigate with. Times have changed, energy prices have stayed stable, crop prices have gone up. I personally have a well that's deeper than that we pump from, and because of the production of 1,000+ gallons per minute, it's actually more economically viable than some of the Oklahoma wells that have gotten much smaller.
But not for a stock well or a domestic
The
well.
question times are later.
Well, fact is, that's the way it is.
Yeah, cut out, lady.
I think we've heard it said a lot of times, we're going to run out of water. Now, I think it's very important to have a clear perspective of what happens as the aquifer pumps down. You know, what happens is you get wells, irrigation wells, that produce much less water. You know, the point, like I say, Jack, that 1,000 gallon well, it makes sense to pump it. If it's pumping 100 gallons or 200 at 500 feet, it becomes much less likely that you're going to economically produce that well. And so the point is, long after irrigation is stopped and is gone, there'll be plenty of adequate water for domestic and livestock purposes. So when you hear people say run out of water, let me be clear that is not going to happen. We'll run out of economically viable irrigation water, that's a sure potential. But to run out of water for domestic and livestock is extremely, it's not gonna happen because I'll get to it a little bit later in the presentation, but we've got some wells from an area that doesn't have much irrigation, and we can take a look at those. But this is from the McLaughlin study. The overall is still an effective source for small domestic production as a recharge to the underlying aquifers. So not me, this is folks that know better.
Do you have any figures any more than 21 years ago? Anything more current?
I'll get to some of those. We've got well measurements that are more current. And again, question time's later, Wes. I'll let those folks talk. You can let me talk. The overall aquifer. Just to kind of point out our position in the size of the overall aquifer, where we fit. There's 13.6 million irrigated acres over the overall aquifer. The Southern High Plains Management District basin has about 100,000. So less than 1% of the total, about 0.7, give or take. I think the number of wells is a similar ratio. Point being there that we can't have a huge impact on the overall aquifer. No matter what happens here, the overall aquifer is going to take its course. I mean, we can't affect it by shutting off every well that we have in the basin. So just an idea that we're in a big place and what we do is going to have not a ton of impact on it. The Southern High Plains Basin, the overall aquifer is much less significant, and really I would say not a significant source of water for irrigation at this point in time. There's farms that are on it, but I'd estimate 10% of the water maybe comes out of the Ogallala that is pumped for irrigation in the basin. That's my wild guess, so don't hold me to it, and everybody's can offer their own opinion. But my experience out of one place that has Ogallala wells. And so if we're going to drill a well today, I'm not aware of any wells that have been drilled exclusively in the Ogallala aquifer for many years, because it's just not. We know it's not going to produce a well that's going to be adequate for long-term irrigation. So those are being drilled at least into the Cheyenne, Dakota, and most of them into the Dockham. I think if I were to, I would drill into the Dockham today. Again, the overall will remain an effective source of domestic production in most areas. I did look, I was interested to know what irrigated acres have done since 2001. I called the Baca County assessor, and the irrigated acres are almost the same. They're just within a few hundred acres of being the same as they were in 2001. However, the flood irrigated acres have shrunk to almost nothing, and pivot irrigated acres have increased. So I think what we've seen happen is a conversion to a much more conservation-minded application of water, and so we're using that irrigation water in a much better way than was being used 20 years ago, and certainly before then. Point being that we'll be able to raise the same acreage of crops on less water, which is going to reduce the withdrawals from the aquifer. And again, the domestic water production will continue long after irrigation is not economically viable. Just a bit about the Dockham aquifer. It is this is also from the McLaughlin study. It's between 300 to 570 feet thick, and that is, I guess, to kind of try to explain the saturated thickness, the importance of that saturated thickness, the huge irrigation wells in the overall around east of Hughes into Plain, some of those wells that still produce 3,000 gallons a minute, they have these 300-foot saturated thicknesses. So the point being that is a lot of water that is available for a lot of production. And and as they noted, and Jack said, they only use the upper 200 feet of formation in doing their withdrawal calculations at that time. I think at this point it's probably wise to examine it more closely and find out exactly what we have and help that inform our decisions on whether to continue to explore that aquifer.
Not really clicking right.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the economic impact because it's pretty important. I mean, that's why Baca County has 4,500 people instead of 1,400 like Kiowa County. I mean, if we were all dry land and grass, 2/3 of the people in this room are going to be gone. But the economic impact of one new dock and well, it produces an increase of $280,000 in annual income. And the way I calculated that was using 2 circles of irrigated corn versus dry land production. And if you take a standard economic multiplier for agriculture production, that equates to $750,000 to the economy by a single dock and well. And that is why we have a John Deere dealership in Baca County, because we wouldn't otherwise. That's why we have 4 parts stores instead of 1. That's why we have Springfield and Walsh and Campo and Vilas and Tees and Pritchard instead of having one town like Branson. That's what separates us. And it's a very significant economic impact. I'd like to discuss, because Wes has mentioned many times that he's had to deepen his well. I'd like to look at, I don't know if all of you know, and this is all available on the Division of Water Resources website, state website. The monitoring wells that are measured every year. There are, I believe, 67 somewhere along those lines, give or take, wells that are measured each year to see what the water depth is doing. And Wes is, at the last meeting, told me that the reason he was interested in all this is because his well, that he had to add to his pump to get water. So I took the closest 8 wells to Wes's house, because I thought that'd be a good way to see what's going on down there. It's an area that's not a lot of irrigation, and so we'll see what we find. These are all either domestic or grass wells. So in an area there's not a lot of irrigation, and I think this is what you find as irrigation becomes not economically viable and irrigation wells are shut down. You'll be in a similar situation, I believe. So this livestock well, you can see, and this is terribly hard to see from back there, so I'll read you the numbers are in the 50s. The depth of the well, depth of water is on the left side, years are on the bottom, and it was measured when it was drilled in 1974. That measurement, usually the first year measurement is kind of thrown out. It wasn't measured again until 1990. And from 1990 until 2023, it has risen 10 feet. And that's the level from about 175 feet to 165. And again, I apologize, it's a little hard to see. This one has only been measured since 2001, been measured every year. Started at 175 feet, ended at 160, 155. Risen about 20 feet since 2001. The next one, the dates are 1991 is the first data measurement. It's about 140 feet of water. Now it's a little less than that, 137, something like that. This well drilled in 1980, you can see almost no change in level. Again, this well drilled in 1980, almost no change in level. This well drilled in 1967 and well drilled in 1946. First measured in 1967 and pretty much flat. Got something more exciting here. And I believe this is probably alluvial to the Cimarron. It's well on the Rich Witcher Ranch and very shallow. I expect that alluvial water from the Cimarron is probably what caused those big spikes. But we've gone from, say, 45 feet in 2001 to 30 feet in 2023. But obviously, that's kind of an off piece. I suspect it's alluvial to Cimarron, so we should probably ignore it for the larger group of folks that aren't going to be in that situation. And the eighth well here has just been flat at 100 feet since 1961. And so the point of that is not to say that we aren't experiencing dropping water level in places, because we all know we are. But the point is to demonstrate what happens whenever it's no longer economically viable to irrigate. Because we're going to see water levels that are very flat, very sustainable for a very long period of time after that point. And so while we want to worry about how long we can irrigate, I think the claims that we're going to run out of water for other reasons are just probably not going to happen. So just wanted to make sure that folks had some of the facts, and like I say, appreciate everybody being here. There's a very large crowd, and I think next we have time for questions. I think it'd be helpful for everyone if we would let people know, for the commission's sake, if you're a resident of the basin or not, as you ask your question or make your comments, please. Thank you.
All right, so I think for the sake of planning the rest of our time here this evening, I'm just going to ask for a couple different shows of hands. Could I see hands of anyone who has a question? And then the next thing I'm going to ask is hands of anybody who would like to come up and make comments to share your thoughts around a rule change. So could I see a show of hands for people who have questions? I see a couple. And then another show of hands for folks who would like to come up and share, your personal thoughts about a potential rule change. Anybody else? And another one, okay. And certainly, you don't have to speak in front of the big crowd. I would really like to encourage people, if you want to share your thoughts just directly with the Groundwater Commission, do go ahead and please turn in a survey in the box at the back of the room before you leave tonight. So I think with that, it's probably appropriate to start with the questions. I welcome people with questions to just, you can come up to the mic at the center of the room or come up here and then people can see your face either way. But, don't be shy if you have a question, or if you want to stand up where you are, I'll repeat your question through the mic. You can ask it from where you are. So any of that is fine. You want to go ahead, Wes? or, oh, sorry, Sam's ahead of you.
Yes, as concerns the municipalities, like when Vilas or Walsh or Springfield runs out of water, they got a new well, they have to need a new well. Those aren't counted as replacement wells. I mean, nobody said anything about stopping replacement wells. So why aren't they replacement wells? Why do they have to be new?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sam. So just to be totally clear, if you have a well and it stops pumping for whatever reason, you can plug and abandon that well and get a replacement well. It's sort of just a duplicate of what you had, but you have to stop using what you used to have. So replacement wells would not be affected by the requested rule change, but any new wells, if there's some, reason that you need to do something different.
Also, existing wells won't be affected.
Yeah, existing wells would not be affected by a rule change. They could continue to pump under the requested rule change. Mr. Shea?
And I understand if you have an existing well that goes dry, you can still apply for a permit. You don't know if you'll get it or not, but you can still apply.
It's a replacement. It would be a replacement, right?
Yeah, so just another comment that replacement wells are not affected whatsoever by the requested rule change. If your well was dry and you need to replace it, you could go ahead and do that. So I see your question. I have another gentleman standing here, so if you don't mind.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd just like to say that Jack had an opportunity to be a plumber at one time. He decided to go in a different direction. I don't think it had anything to do. Last time he worked for me, I had him dig about an 8-foot hole, and I had to hold him by the ankles while I cut into the sewer. I don't think it had anything to do with him not being a plumber. My question would be for Blake and Kim. I'm just curious, I've been for a long time, how often do the monitoring wells get checked, and are they checked at certain times of year so that you can tell whether or not not in the fall? I know with the main well at Walsh, the level goes down quite a bit as the corn harvesting, corn season goes along.
I think that's probably a question better for staff here, because they get the actual measurement.
Oh, okay.
Out of the office.
Okay, and I think Tilden answered the other question about the petition was, I was pretty certain that the replacement wells would be allowed, and
That's right.
that any change would, at this point, would affect the replacement. And you might answer, how does that work as far as how, do you know? I know we don't have meters.
Replacement wells, how do they work?
But is there an original allocation that determines whether or not people can drill replacement wells?
Yep, I can answer that. So with regard to the monitoring wells, I believe they're measured in the springtime. I know our team that does the depth to water measurements tries to do it at times of year that are not affected by the irrigation season. And I'll also add to what Mr. Hume said about those monitoring well levels being available on our website. Also, if you go to the link with a QR code on your agenda, the latest report for this area summarizing all of the measurements of all of those wells is one of the items there in the folder if you're curious to know more. And just regarding the replacement wells, those wells are originally permitted with a certain volume amount, and so that is what a replacement well would be allowed as well. I'm just going to ask my staff over there to correct me or our staff to correct me if I say anything wrong. So a replacement is really just a twin or a mirror of the well that you're replacing.
So the volume and use. So right? If you have a permit for 400 acre feet and 160 acres of irrigation, and you want to re-drill your well, you can get a re-drill permit for the exact same uses and appropriation. It's if you are choosing to make changes and you want to expand your acres or you want to change your use, that the valuation could affect what you're given. It could be considered a new appropriation. It could require some changes to that allocation. So a straight replacement for what you have and what you would get in replacement would be equal, provided you're applying for everything the same.
Brian Kelly. I was under the understanding that a replacement well has to be within so many feet of the original well. But what if I can't get one in that area? Let's say that the town of Walsh cannot get a replacement within the feet of where it goes, then what?
Yeah. Is it 200 feet of the original? A replacement must be located within 200 feet.
I think, is it 200, 300? I don't know if the district has, some management districts have rules that could adopt a shorter distance, but if you are requesting for a distance greater than the statutory 300 feet, it would be considered a new appropriation. That's what you would be applying for.
Can everybody hear that answer?
I didn't hear it very well.
Okay. Yeah, so Chris was saying that if for some reason you're not able to replace your well within the allowed 300 feet, then you would be looking at getting a new appropriation. That would be considered a new well. That, you know, the way to do that within the rule change is a replacement a replacement plan, which is something difficult to do. You basically would have to replace your depletions to the aquifer through some other means. So it's a hard thing to do. It's possible, but it's hard.
So my point was that if you can't do it, let's say the town of Walsh loses their main well, and they can't do it within the 300 feet. You close the basin, they can't re-drill and get exact well from that.
Yeah, they would not be able to just do the direct, straightforward replacement process. I'm looking at Chris and Joanna to see if there's some other straightforward option that.
Not a straightforward option, no.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a town in that kind of.
I'm just trying to point out the contradiction from what he said, that you can have the replacement well. Well, you can if it's within the so many feet, but if it's not, then the town of Walsh, town of Springfield, or any municipal outlet will be out of luck with the closed space.
Right, and I guess, you know, I don't want to have people hear what you're saying and fear that their towns will have to go without water. I think it would be challenging for them to find out how to do a replacement plan and put it in place in order to drill a new well. So I think it would be more challenging for municipalities to have to get a new well because that process is difficult.
I didn't know that it had to be within 300 feet when I said that. I did not know that.
That's what you got to know the rules and regulations, because they're there.
I see your hand in the back. We have someone who's been waiting here. If I could start with her, please.
I have two questions for you. Sorry about that. Maybe I'll stand back here and you can just repeat it. I have two questions. One is the groundwater district. How many wells have you know been drilled in the Baca in the last 5 years or so?
So the question is how many wells, she's asking the district if they know how many wells have been drilled in the Baca in the past several years.
I would just hazard a guess at 6 to 10. I mean, it's not a lot.
And I think when this whole thing came up was about water speculation and the thoughts of people buying land, doing water speculation, and monitoring permits that were then converted into other permits. And my concern is some of those permits, although originally didn't say they were in the Ogallala. When I pulled the actual permits, they were in the Ogallala aquifer. So do you know about those? Those were on the LGSL permit place. So I would love to bring those to you at some point and ask you, because I don't know if it's misreported, and maybe that's what we're seeing, but it's like a 400 foot and it was actually going into Ogallala.
Yeah, for information's sake, the Ogallala is currently referred into most of the documentation as the High Plains Aquifer.
Right.
I don't know if that's source of the confusion or not, but I'm not intimately familiar with those. They were through the process when I got on the commission.
That's what I thought, so I didn't know if you knew about that, but when I actually pulled the permits, originally they were monitoring permits that were just like 40 feet or so. Well, when I actually pulled the permits, some of them were down to 400 feet. So I think that was a concern, and one of the suggestions was maybe there's an alternative to protect the area that's not a full closing of the basin, but a way to protect your water here in the county. And that's all I would encourage you to do, if possible.
Just to clarify on that, however, so when they turn in for monitoring,
Can everybody hear these folks? Maybe you all will just come up. It's just important that everybody gets to hear all the conversations.
So, to address that question, the question was, or maybe it's a question or statement, I'm not sure, that some of the wells were maybe misrepresented and then squeezed through on a technicality. Would that be kind of the way you would?
Actually, they were supposed to be like 40-foot wells roughly, and then some of them, when they actually turned in the permitting, they were 400 feet, and they were into the Ogallala aquifer, which is a different aquifer than they were originally set out as a monitoring well for.
Okay, well, Chris or Tracy, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But for a monitoring well, you don't have to go through publications, correct?
Correct.
But as soon as that well an application goes in to convert that well from a monitoring well to an irrigation well, or to a municipal well, or whatever it may be, it has to go through the exact same steps, which would include publication, that any of those wells initially would have. So I guess the reason the idea that it slipped through kind of unnoticed would be, I think, false, because it would have been out there in the publication.
Well, yeah, the publication referred it to as a monitoring well, didn't say off the aquifer, but when I pulled the actual permits off the state website, it said it was in the Ogallala. Yep. And that's my question, is how that happened. And maybe that's a clerical error, I don't know, but the permit actually states in the Ogallala, although the newspaper ad didn't really say that. So,
and this might clear your question, but even though there are different formations, and we've been talking about the different formations tonight, permits for the Southern High Plains, I believe since 2009, they have been issued, it doesn't matter actually which formation you complete in, it's considered one geohydraulic system, so you might think that you would only drill a certain depth, but you're not limited to any particular depth. There's no differentiation from a permitting. What's that?
The monitorings aren't limited to depth?
None of the permits in the Southern High Plains need to comply with any particular depth range.
Thank you, that helps.
Sure.
Excuse me, would you mind stating your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Belinda Sturgis.
And do you live within the basin?
I'm right on the edge, and we have water on the Ogallala.
So that's a no?
I don't know exactly. I was asking today about the map.
Okay.
I'm right on the edge. And we're right there on the Baca per hour's line.
West of 287?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be a no.
I don't know what that has to do with it.
Well, the basin, the
rules.
Technicality. That's lawyer Shyster.
Well,
we do have a lawyer Shyster degrees, Tim and I went to school together.
I'm sure.
there's some back and forth right now, but one thing that is important is that if you were to apply for a well permit outside of the basin, you wouldn't be subject to the rules we're talking about tonight. So in that way, you're not subject to the rules we're discussing. And so in that way, it is important.
Okay, I don't live in the basin, but I have land in the basin for many years.
Yeah,
I've
so,
had 4 wells go dry. I'd like to be able to drill 2 wells deeper.
yeah,
And I would like to have confidence that those wells are gonna last more than 20 years. And let's say, I want to refute what you're saying a little bit about
did you want to,
domestic
yeah,
wells.
did you want to come up here so we can hear you?
I think we're being a little bit cavalier about the domestic wells. I think that, yeah, there will always be wells and there will always be water for domestic wells. You may have to drill 4 or 5 times to find it. There's going to be areas where I don't believe you'll be able to produce a domestic well, is what I believe. That'll be far into the future. 20, 25 years from now, I think. But I do believe that there's going to be, and I may be wrong, if somebody can convince me otherwise, I'm all for it. But I think there's going to be, there's a lot of domestic wells that have already gone dry because they were in the top of the water, but they can drill deeper. Okay, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as saying it's not going to affect domestic wells or stock wells.
You realize drilling a well is crap, right? Like, you're not gonna be guaranteed,
Exactly.
doesn't mean there's no water there.
Exactly, and I want
These guys take chances all the time drilling these wells. Sometimes they don't pan out. Doesn't mean the water's gone. You understand?
Exactly right.
Okay.
Do you still have your question or comment?
My question was back to, like, municipal well permit. So if we purchase water rights or a well that already has a permit, would that be a replacement? Because Town of Walsh does need a new well. We can't get one within 2 or 3 years. We've got a project that we've been working on for 4 years, 5 years. It's gone through a process with CDPHE and USDA and it's been all approved. And this could be pretty catastrophic if we couldn't get a well permit for this project that we spent thousands and thousands of dollars on.
So the town of Walsh has been working on a project, going through a lot of permitting from other agencies. I didn't follow what you meant about you don't have an existing well, or?
We have an existing well, but we have to have a supplemental well. We have to have a treatment plant and, so our whole plan involves another well. Obviously, we have more than one well. We've got 5, but only one has water.
Okay.
So the solution that we've come up with has been engineered and approved by these different agencies involves buying another well in land that's a mile away, half mile.
So perhaps you're purchasing an irrigation well and converting it? Yeah.
So
right.
Would that be a replacement well since we'd be purchasing water rights?
Right. So the town of Walsh is purchasing an irrigation well, it sounds like, and converting it to a municipal use.
Yes.
So you go through a process called a change of use process, and generally that change of use well is just limited to the historic use of the irrigation well within the legal bounds of its permit. So that's not a replacement, and it's not a new well either. So that process, that change of use from irrigation to another use, is not affected by the proposed rule change. They're nodding, so that was correct.
I'm a mayor of Walsh, CDPHE is going to make that, we have the well bought. CDPHE is going to make the re-drilling because it wasn't drilled according to their specifications for drinking water for a municipality. So the question is, what if we can't get another well within a certain number of feet when we're already in the middle of this multi-million-dollar project? What do we do then? We have one well, if something happens to it, you can't flush it twice.
Yeah, and so just in case not everybody could hear, again, the town of Walsh, going through this process to convert an irrigation well to a municipal well. What if they're not able to re-drill it? They need to re-drill it per health department requirements. What if they're unable to do that within the 200 or 300 feet limit? That you're allowed for replacement well, because you're going to replace it and you're doing a change of use process. So, you know, I'm not sure if a variance is a possibility. You can get a variance, but that is statutory, correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple options. You can request a variance that goes before the Groundwater Commission.
I'm trouble hearing you.
So there's a couple options. One is you could request a variance to the rule, the spacing rule, and that goes before the commission. The other option is there is an option for a change of water right to change a well location, but that goes through the same historical withdrawal depletion analysis that Tracy just talked about for the change of use. It's kind of a similar process.
We're concerned about the well we have going down. If it goes down, how long does this process take?
The change process can take a while, probably a minimum is probably about 3 months because it has to be published.
In the winter, we're using about 75,000 gallons a day. Where do we get that water for the people to drink?
I don't know that answer.
Yeah, so that, you know, really important question, and the staff of the Groundwater Commission is available to help support you with these difficult questions, describe your options in detail. So I recommend you guys go ahead and reach out and we can talk about the process and how it might work best for your needs. So, who else here, you know, would like to make some comments or suggestions or any other questions?
I have a question. A while ago, you said that, you know.
Sorry, could you speak a little louder?
A while ago, you said there's probably enough water for 100 years. How many more wells are you going to drill with that? What's that based on?
Yes, Rusty, that was based on the 2002 McLaughlin study and their projections.
I understand the projections, but I don't understand how many more wells you're going to drill off that projection.
Right, at the moment, you know, I think economics have kept the number of new wells that have been drilled in this area to a pretty reasonable number. I mean, we're not seeing 30 wells a year getting drilled. We're not seeing things like that. It's because there's risk of getting a dry hole. I mean, one in every 3 or 4 wells you get in a good formation is going to be dry, and that stinks, but it happens. And so today, economics has handled that. I mean, there hasn't been a huge number of new wells drilled, a huge number of new withdrawals made. You know, it's a fairly leisurely pace, mostly by folks that live in the basin. And I'd just like to make one quick comment about kind of the other actions that have been going on in the basin with the objections to permits over the past several years that I think kind of that have been done by the petitioners, knowing full well that they have no basis under the current rules, the current law, they have no basis to object. Yet they persist in objecting until, and I'm sorry, if you spend $10 to object, if that's too much money for you, because guess what? We need to pay an attorney $7,500 every time you object baselessly to one of our wells. So I don't want to hear you complain about how much money it costs you. And this is happening.
$75,000. And if I can get it up there, I'll do it.
They've protested over 70 wells, many of which were not an increase in appropriations. They were only a change in commingling, things like that. They've objected every single one of them.
She protested my wells that are 50 years old and on a re-permitting, a final permit.
And I think that's just show of bad faith by the objectors, and it needs to be known. They wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money by demanding these hearings over and over and over every time. Well, knowing what's gonna happen, the moment there's a
Tim, I did check our map, and we're in the lower corner, right there on the ranch. We're on that corner between Baca and Prowers right there. So I did want to bring this up. This is a 2020 water study.
To the mic.
This is a 2020 water study. On this 2020 water study, according to this, the Ogallala is down 15.8, negative change from 2010 to 2020. The Baca was down 6.9. And the Dakota Cheyenne was down 10.7. So I would just encourage the whole community to keep that in mind. These are the latest reports posted on the state website from 2020 of the decline in the water. So maybe there's a way to work cooperatively to manage that. Thank you.
I did see another question or comment in this area.
I have a question. What is the difference in the procedure to do appropriations now than it was, say, like in 1959 or 60? Is there a difference in the formula or how it's done?
So I don't think that, you just said 1950 maybe as a random number. I don't think the designated basin actually was formed until the 1960s or after that. So
early on.
Yeah. So I can't really answer your question about what's changed. I personally haven't studied that, but so I guess I don't really know.
economic development for a few. How many years ago did we have 5 grocery stores in the town? We had 6 ball teams, championship teams, field at a full time. What do we have now? 2 grocery stores. How many car dealerships, implement dealers, mechanics? How many do we have now? Blake, you said that to get a monitoring well into a production well cost a process. LGS applied for 29 monitoring wells. Within a couple of months, they had production wells. You were on the commission at that time. Senator Corman and myself asked Kevin Rain how you did that. He said we did policy and rule. We never did get an answer. And as to the appropriations, Jack said, and he would argue, don't try arguing, he's my student, you're not going to win. But there is some merit to the law that says when you want a high capacity well, if you want a well, then you apply. And they check and see. And if that water is available, you get it. Tim, do you think you should follow that law? And if the water is available, you should have it? I do. I firmly believe if the appropriation to satisfy your request is available, you should get the water. But the law says no. Where did you come up with this? If you're not in the basin, you have no rights. Is that law, statute, rule? Absolutely. Where did it come up? Let me tell you, everyone does the same thing in the bathroom and the same water gets rid of it. So how can you say you don't have any rights? Of course you have rights. And the law again says anyone can object. And to the thank you. I guess it's safe to get out. Maybe I got somebody that will. And how can you say you don't have any rights? Because you do. Everyone has the same right. Now, the fact that you're going to spend $50,000 when all it costs me, you, it just costs $10. That's true. Blake spent $50,000 getting one well and sued me for the cost. Didn't get nothing, but that's okay. All you have to do is go to your state. Now, I agree, there is some disparity here. Because if you apply for a permit, Tracy looks at it, and she determines, you don't have to, she determines there's not a well within 600 foot. She determines there is no material damage. She determines appropriation of that permit granted. Now, if you don't agree with that, then she might say permit denied. If those factors are not satisfied, she'll deny the permit. And it's not the 50,000, it's the 100 that you pay for the commission. You should go to the 100. It's not your responsibility. Thank you.
All right, who else would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Is there any chance that we could get the local groundwater management district to support, maybe getting a current engineering report so that we actually have current facts on the status of the water instead of speculating from a 20-year-old or using other ancillary reports? Couldn't we just get one current one so we all have the same facts and then that would flesh itself out? I mean, the facts will be facts.
And I'll just repeat that. The question was, might the local groundwater management district get an up-to-date report rather than the most recent is from 2002, the McLaughlin report that we've been talking about?
Or support us in getting commissioned. I'm not really sure the process, but perhaps there is a process we could all join together on just to get the actual current facts so that we're not just arguing speculation.
Or some other way of getting a more updated report. I don't know if the district wants to
respond. I can't really say that the district wouldn't be in support of that. I would ask Chris, as he's the guy that I see here that probably has the best idea what a study like the McLaughlin study would cost to do in 2023. Best guess, just, I mean, we're going to crucify you if you're wrong.
I'm
So,
trying to throw a number out there, but, you know, if we try to compare to modeling that's been done in the northern high plains with similar issues, you know, that's millions of dollars.
right.
But I have no clue what a new model's cost would be here. You hire engineers to do your modeling.
Right. So, in case you didn't hear, I mean, his best guess based on modeling and studies that they've done in the northern high plains said it would cost us millions of dollars, which I would love it if the district had millions of dollars. We don't have that. We don't have any way currently to get that. We don't have a mill levy. We don't have an assessment. So as far as the district supporting it, I mean, we can be your cheerleader, but as far as where the funding is going to come from, that's beyond us.
The 2002 report.
Is that the reason why it hasn't been done yet, though? Is it an economically driven decision? And if there is funding that can be found, that would be something that potentially we would support, because it would be great.
We're not against, I mean, I think you could probably tell by our presentation, we only presented information from credible findings. We didn't present opinions. We only presented what are perceived as facts or credible findings from trusted sources. So yeah, we're certainly in favor of more credible information. I think that's always a good thing. Absolutely, yes. We'd absolutely support that.
That's what I was just thinking we should look into for sure, just to know, because there's no sense, actually, the data you're using and extracting your perception from is the same that they're using. They're just interpreting it differently. So all we need is new information that's up to date, and then maybe we can all come to the table and have a meaningful discussion that isn't just based on we think it might mean this or we think it might mean that.
Right. I would just correct you though in saying that we're using the same information and interpreting differently. We're using all of it, and that was the difference. We looked at all the information. We didn't omit what didn't suit us. So that would be the difference in how we're looking at the information. But thank you.
So this study I was just talking about was done by the state, and it says Matthew Sayers, Chief Hydrology Section. It's on the groundwater level measurements in the Southern High Plains designated groundwater basin from 2020. Have you guys seen that report, the 2020 report?
Are you referring to the annual measurements of the watering wells?
Well, it's a report filed with the Division of Water Resources. Looks like Kevin Rain and Matthew Sayers, Chief Hydrology Selection. And it says groundwater level measurements in the Southern High Plains designated groundwater basin. So it looks like they've already started doing a lot of studies.
Well, there's just an ongoing, there's just an ongoing annual groundwater level measurement
So my
program.
question is, could maybe that work with what she said? Contacting them since they've already been involved in this portion.
Right. So, you know, I guess they're two different things. One is just that ongoing annual measurement of levels in individual wells, and the McLaughlin study that was done in 2002, comprehensive, looking at how much irrigation is occurring, how much precipitation is occurring, and what's the difference between our recharge and our withdrawals, and how much water is in the aquifer. And so, you know, a lot of that information is still valid. You know, what they found that there is more withdrawal than there is recharge. It's still going to be valid. You can get more up-to-date information. It'll be more precise and you'll know more to the date. But, you know, I think a lot of what's in that 2000 study is still going to be valid. So, like Mr. Wood said, though, I think that study was funded by a grant from the Colorado Water Conservation Board that the state agency still provides grants. You know, I'm sure you could apply for grants to do additional studies. That would certainly be worthwhile, but I guess I'm just trying to say I think there is a lot of good information already. It is dated, no doubt, but I mean, it is also good quality information as well. So
you're saying you may know where some grants are, and there's someone that I could just connect with after this to see if we can get some direction as to where to find the applications, because I did purchase personally the equipment to check the depths of our wells.
Okay.
I've been tracking them to be sure. There are many variables, so any of that's, you know, it depends on which day you're looking, like I said, what time of the year are you checking. I check mine very regularly, just to look at the different weather patterns and different kind of factors that could be influencing the data. I know it's not just exact, but if there are some places for some grants, I think we should definitely look into it, because if that money is sitting there for that use, then that's what we should be trying to use it for. Also, just one quick question. I'm sorry I missed the very beginning of the presentation, so I may be asking something that was already spoken to, but is it possible in this that you're proposing that maybe just this docker would be able to be drilled, since it seems to be the place where people are agreeing the water is, as opposed to the others? I mean, could the variance of the variability of the depth actually come into play in terms of the rule? Because maybe then you could just only hit where the water is, according to this extrapolation of this 20-year-old data. If it's in the document, then maybe that's the only place we should be drilling. Can that be, you know, drilled down to get that? Is it possible to change or amend the rule to say something about the depth?
yeah, so I think are you saying rather than a maybe wholesale closure rule change, might there be a rule change that considers that wells should only be completed in the DOCM?
Well, I'm only saying DOCM because I've heard it referenced here by the experts that are here, that that's the one where the water is or maybe is or something. But suppose we did know that was it. Just assuming that's true, why not just go there and not to these other places where we know there's stress on the water?
So maybe a rule change that would limit new appropriations to just the DOCM and not other formations that we know are stressed. I'm just trying to repeat so
yes,
everybody
exactly
can hear
that,
you.
except for I can't say it's exactly the DOCM because I haven't done the research, but something along those lines, if that were to be a fact. Go drill to where the water is. If this water is.
I think those are the types of alternative rule proposals that your community could look into and propose. I don't know that I'm qualified to say that that would be an effective rule change and would, you know, do what it is that you would want to do.
My question is more procedural.
Yeah.
Within the realm of possibility to make a suggestion that it be, you know, defined in that way.
Yeah.
Not just overall closure, overall open, but some other hybrid version.
Yeah. Procedurally, yes, absolutely. I think that's a rule change proposal that you could make, you know, and I think this might be a good time to point out that that 2002 study, the McLaughlin study, it did make a whole long list of management recommendations to consider. They may not all be good ones, but, you know, your community can look at, you know, alternatives, you know, rules that are going to be applied uniformly to all. you know, we can't pick and choose who the rules apply to, but, you know,
Well,
and
hindsight is 20/20, so now 20 years past that study is a really great time to look back and figure out how much of the speculation actually came true and what factors influenced that. That's why I think a new study would be valuable, but there's a lot of ways to research and analyze the data, I'm sure. So we really are sitting 20 years ahead of where they thought we might be, and now's a great time to stop and look back and figure out if it's true, not just say, see, they said it was going to be true, therefore it is, because that's really false.
thank you. Yeah, and we can talk about grant opportunities. Yes, sir.
Tracy, how do we get on to be interested parties to the hearing?
So if,
You can tell us that.
okay, just while he's making his way to the mic. And
My name is Douglas Melcher. I live up in Pryor County. I live in the district. And the money, sparsely as it is, that the district has retained over the years was an assessment on the irrigation wells, not dry land irrigation wells on production. Are the objectors willing to pay an assessment on their land to get this study implemented?
No, thank you.
Mr. McKinley just asked how to get on the notification list. And I think what you mean is if the Groundwater Commission does decide to convene a rule change process, then we'll start into a formal process. This is just gathering your input at a public meeting, but if they decide to start a rulemaking process, we'll have a list of emails and mailing addresses where you can be noticed if there's formal stakeholder meetings or when there are deadlines in that rulemaking process. And so there's a way to sign up for that notification list on DWR's website, and there's instructions for that. There's a document, again, at that QR code. There's instructions to sign up to be on the notification list. So if you do want to be on the list and get noticed, it describes how to do that.
Also on the survey number 6, ask for an email address if you'd like to be notified.
Thank you. What other questions or input? Oh, yeah.
Officer, be ready. I'm going to make a statement here. We've been hearing about LGS quite a little bit. I'm Kerry Cromer. We come from Pratt, Kansas, sells real estate for Hayden Outdoors. I come out to the Witcher Ranch when it was for sale, when we had it listed under Hayden Outdoors, just to look for a buyer on that place. In doing so, you know, the place needed a lot of, you know, had a lot of potential with the river bottom being down through there and everything there. And they had the big lodge there. They had suppers and meals out and stuff. And so they hired us to sell their property. So I come out there, I wasn't a listing agent, I was just going to go look for a buyer. And so in doing that, you know, I said, guys, there's a lot of opportunity here, but it's going to have to be cleaned up and dressed up before you can get the money that you're asking for that place. And so they're out, both absentee owners. They said, well, what would it take for you to come out here and do this? And we have leased lots of ranches back in Pratt and Barber and Comanche County over the years, and grew up raising hogs when I was a child back there, strictly all farm and ag. So I threw a wild number out there just to, you know, because I was making a good living doing what I was doing, and doing enough, kept us busy enough. So anyway, we kept our place at Pratt, but I moved out here. Wife moved out about 3 months later. A year later, it sold to LGS Holding Group in a year. We've been there 6 years, LGS Holding Group. There's all kinds of stories going on. Wes gets a Colorado Springs newspaper gal out here saying, you know, my trash is another man's, or my, you know, some man's junk is another man's treasure, and saying that, you know, that these out-of-state buyers just got to wear gold chains, smoking cigars, and have women under their arm. Doug Adams, who's the principal of that, as an 800-person school, Christian school in Stockbridge, Georgia, he managed his business. He lost everything in 2008 almost. His two brothers had to sell both their houses, and he knows how to build things back up from nothing. That's what he's done. And he enjoys hunting, so when he come on the place, he said, I want to invest in the hunting and the irrigation, because it did have, Baca County had open basin water rights. We've done everything by law. Tim Crawford is our water attorney. We've worked with the state, everything we've done. He knew he was an outsider coming into the county. I was an outsider coming in when I first came in there. And still feel like I'm, an outsider on the way in. I never got off the ranch. I probably know about 10 people in this whole place. So anyway, long story short, Doug Adams come in here. He wanted to approve the hunting, do the irrigation. We went through all the process. Our first application process called for these 29 wells, which Wes is talking about. We went back after that, and I told him, hey, more water and less acres is better than lots more acres and less water. So we've submitted now and have it in going through the process of commingling some wells. But what nobody knows is that we went from putting 11 to 12 circles on that place to 6, and then we canceled wells not to use for that purpose. And so we're actually, just be clear so everybody knows where we're at on this thing. That's what we did to help preserve. And now, we did go through, then we purchased down in Oklahoma. I don't know, somebody brought a newspaper from me, and we've all kind of become neighbors now over the years in the local area, within 5 or 6 miles, and said, hey, we heard that the Witcher side sold to the Oklahoma Conservancy Agency. I said, well, that's funny, I'm still here, no, there isn't. And I wanted to come back and ask the board where they got that information from, and why they would now say in a newspaper addressing it had been sold in Colorado. And they'd never put a bid or an offer in on the place at that time. And they never put an offer in until after the winning offer of the bid was of the sale of the property to the new people, who is John Gary Burns, his brother Wilson Burns. They're 41 and 43 years old. Their dad had a farm store that they sold farm goods out. He said they sold 800 bags of dog food. They said they got coon dogs and they got bird dogs down there, I guess. I don't know, it's one of their big deals. But they grew up on 2,000 acres of irrigated ground down there, plus they ranged down there about peanuts and cotton. That's their background, what they did. And so then about 10 years ago, they figured out there was more money to be made buying and selling commercial property, building distribution warehouses for like Amazon or whatever. And they grew up also in the lumber business. And so they had a lot of outlets towards Georgia pine. Saying that China bought the damn place is a damn lie. They do export all over the world, and they do export Georgia pine, and they do it to Vietnam, Korea, China. Their main deal is that they're developing constructed grounds there. They turned the farm store. Their dad was Senate in the state Senate. He's now Speaker of the House in the state Senate. Good guys, down to earth guys. All the guys. They're hardworking guys. Doug Adams, his whole family, it doesn't matter who this is at. They wanted to help me more times when they was on the ranch, and I was told them more times than not, you need to enjoy your ranch, let me go ahead and do what I'm doing here and do that. But we have tried to manage and take care of that. The new guys, there was a bunch of ground that was kind of broke out along the river edge there before the irrigation was there. Our deal is now this year we're going to go get it all back into grass and let it go back and get reestablished like it was. So the new guys are good guys. I'm going to leave my cards on the back there. Nobody's ever asked me my opinion or where we come from and what's doing. I will say this, it used to upset me. I send out flyers to different counties and say, hey, if you want to sell some ground, I'll be glad to help represent you. Hayden Outdoors, when we sold that Witcher Ranch, it sold for $100 more an acre than any of the rest of the other 40,000 acres that we bought. And so, guy told me, well, you guys are just causing our taxes to go up and everything else. I'm like, no, this guy asked us to sell that property. If we don't sell it, he's going to let somebody else sell it. So just because guys have the ability to turn dollars and make dollars and want to improve themselves, don't knock them. We come from nothing. My wife, when we got married, I got her $200 ring. It's got Canarvie diamonds in it. She says, what's that? I said, you can hardly sing it. She's still wearing it 21 years later. So if anybody's got more questions up, I am going to leave some cards and be glad to visit with anybody. And I do know I was in the pickup with Doug Adams, when he called Wes, I said, Wes, on the very front end, is there anything we can do to, work this out? You're protesting this thing. I think it's costing us a lot of money as a producer and not costing him a lot. I mean, some of that stuff I think came in on damn napkins from the restaurant, and you hear, words in it. It was not put in appropriately like it's supposed to be. And my last statement is, Doug, Wes just said, just sue me. Doug never sued anybody in his life. He's not going to do that. He's not that type of person. And when I did, what my deal was, I said, Doug, I said, give me 100 bumper stickers that says, I love LGS Holding Group. And I'm going to go to Wes's yard. I'm going to have one on every tractor, every deal, just to help Wes out and just let him know. So anyway, thank you. If I can help any, I will. Oh, and also, just one second. Also, in the permitting of those wells, as we did those monitoring wells and converted them to irrigation wells, the young lady back here had mentioned that one of them was drilled 400 feet. That was done by Witchers way a long time ago when they were trying to find deeper water. That was not LGS. If it was, it's misprinted because all our wells there, we get to red bed at 60 feet. We drill the wells to 80 feet, hit 20 foot up out of there, and we quit. So, I mean, there's one, I think the first two wells, we went to 100 feet just to see if it's getting better. But everybody told us once you got the red bed down there and it's all river water, there's nothing from the Ogallala. I can get you Tim Crawford's number, he can tell you exactly like it is, and we get you all that information.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Sir. So, have I been lied to that the Wicker Ranch didn't
sell to Greenland developers, the Chinese buyers?
They're not Chinese buyers. They're as white as you and I are. Their name's John Gary. They're from Georgia. They're from Georgia. Yeah, they're from Springfield, Georgia.
Red-blooded Americans.
Yeah.
That's not what the deeds say, Greenland developers. They don't say Chinese buyers. But when I researched
I just told you they export stuff to China, Vietnam, Korea. They export stuff there. What does that matter?
They do, and they buy land in Baca County, southern Baca County, and I wonder why.
It doesn't matter where it comes from. Just because they're
Baca County. Sorry.
All right. Any other questions? Suggestions around your thoughts on the Southern High Plains rules? Okay. Well, I think if there's no other questions or suggestions around the rules, I just want to thank you all for your time and attention tonight. I will ask again. Sir, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I got some questions. You guys, there, when you drill a well, an irrigation well, is there any depth formation that you have to seal off the top water?
So the question was, when you drill an irrigation well, is there any depth you have to case off the top water? And while that was one of the regulations back in the late 90s, I believe, I think it changed in the early 2000s. They did a separate aquifer system, and it may have been with the McLaughlin study. I'm not sure when it came about. That was before my time of participating in this. But at some point, they determined that the aquifers all meet each other in various places throughout the basin. So it's a one aquifer system, as it's stated right now. So when the state looks at it, when staff looks at it, they don't look at it as the Ogallala, the Cheyenne, the Dakota, the Dauphin. They look at it as a one aquifer system. So the short answer is no. The long answer is that system was in place, and the studies indicated that it served no purpose to case off different layers of water-bearing formations.
around our country, if you have 5 gallon, you've got a decent well. So, what's an average gallon per minute on a high capacity well? What would you call an average?
Well, that's a tough one, because there are people here that are putting 50 gallons a minute into their system, and that's called a high capacity well. There are probably some good Dockham wells in the basin that are putting out, what would you say, 1,200 gallons a minute, maybe. You know, I mean, there's some of that there's more of the 50s than there are the 1200s, because they're old wells. And every well's got a lifespan. I mean, they don't last forever. And and we have a lot more old wells than we have new ones. If you go through and look, and it's all available online, it just takes a little bit of your own time looking for it. You can go in and look and see what wells have been drilled and when they've been drilled. You can look through the whole basin and see the age of the wells, and you'll see that we got a lot more wells from 1950 through 1970 than we do from 1970 to now. And that's pure speculation on my part. I don't know that for sure, because I haven't wanted to spend my time going through and checking to see when wells are drilled. But my experience with irrigation wells throughout the basin are that most of them are old wells, drilled 50 plus years ago.
Well, it just looks to me like, I know this is a touchy subject. People don't want to turn each other against everybody. But when you have 500 gallons a minute, why is that top water not being sealed off? If you got 500 gallons, surely you don't need another 3 to 5 gallons. Why not seal off that top water to ensure the people with shallower wells, that their wells maybe won't go dry, so they have to re-drill just for the sake of a few having more water?
Well, I'm not.
Somebody else have to drill a well deeper so you guys have more water. Like I said, I know it's a touchy subject, but I've had a well driller tell me 2 or 3 different times this year that, well, I can't drill yours right now because so-and-so's well went dry. His house well went dry. I got to go drill him a well. And some of this has been up around 2 years. The Forest Service has told me down in the Capital area that they've had to re-drill several wells. I was hoping there'd be some representatives here tonight from the Forest Service. I don't know if anybody made it or not. So, Tim, you said that we'll never run out of water. Well, the dry well is a fact. It ain't speculation, looks to me like.
Yeah, I think, John, there's a difference between a dry well and running out of water. Re-drilling the well to a deeper depth is still a capability. We're not going to run everybody out of the country by running out of water, is what I'm trying to say. I recognize it's cost to people, and it's a cost that we need to take seriously. But
I used to work for a farmer over East Garden City. Back then, if you had them wells was south of 1,200 gallons. I was talking to Gary the other day. He said a lot of their wells are down to 200 gallons now. And that's over there probably in the Oklahoma, I guess. Yeah. Another thing that I've always thought about, I don't know how much fact it could be, but the government's come out at so many different times trying to get some of our land. Pinyon Canyon expansion, National Heritage Area. Well, what better way to get us off the land than to let us run out of water?
So you want the government to come in and play more of a role in the basin, is what you're saying? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Sealing off the top water instead of letting it run deeper and deeper and deeper 24/7. And who made that rule change as far as letting all this water commingle and go down deeper and deeper? Who made that change?
I presume at some point it went through the commission back probably right after the 2002 study, I think. Would be my best guess, but I can't answer that.
Was that the Southern Plains Water Commission?
It would have been the State Groundwater Commission would have made that determination to change the rules. And I
You know,
think,
that rule was in effect, I think, in 2006, because we drilled a big well up on Fourth Street, went to 800 foot, and we had to top cut. We had to seal everything off, going out, down, and wind and shit.
but
We had a good well, if we were able to take them all, we get to take a couple hundred feet out of the dock. It just wasn't enough.
I'd say I certainly don't disagree with your idea about casing off the top water if it's effective in places that we ought to do it. I mean,
There's nobody that I know of that lives in the country that takes the top water.
Yeah.
That would interfere with their house well.
Yeah.
That's just foolish.
On wells, I've drilled 3 wells in the past 5 years or so, and I didn't put perforated casing in the Ogallala because, like you say, it's probably not worth paying the price to perforate the casing, really.
Might create a bigger problem with cascading.
Yeah,
It does, it absolutely does.
I keep hearing a reference to Baca wells, but I thought it was all one system, so I'm not sure why sometimes it's called something when it's helpful to say it that way, and then sometimes it's helpful to say it all together. I'm not exactly following that very well, but isn't it true that the economic impact is what's driving the fact that you're saying we'll always have water, is when the economic, you had a better way of wording it. You said something a couple of times about how the ability for people who are making a living with the water is going to deplete before the domestic water runs out. We'll never run out of water. But we may run out of the amount of water needed to continue to produce economically. Like you said, it's so much better. But if there isn't an economy, there won't really be much need for domestic. There wouldn't be able to live here, we would have no way to support themselves. So they kind of go hand in hand. That's the thought I'm having anyway. They aren't separate, because if there's no way to produce a living, people won't stay to live. It kind of goes in my mind.
All right, and I think it's important that as we make these decisions and that we use the facts that are in our hands and I think I would love to have a 2023 study absent the cost. I mean, that's going to be a big hurdle to get over, but if we can find a way that makes sense, what doesn't want good information? You know, what the problem is, we have actors currently who are ignoring the information that we have today, and if we're going to do that with new information, what's the point of getting new information? So if we do get that new information, we need to have folks in the room that are willing to pay attention to it, willing to abide by what folks who are much smarter than me, as Jack said, are going to tell us. And from that study, they've said that the Ogallala will continue to be a source for domestic and livestock wells. I mean, these are folks that are certainly a whole lot smarter than us and a whole lot more versed in the issues. But the problem is we're relying on folks like Wes who at every turn tonight, he gets up and he tries to say that I'm trying to take away people's rights. I mean, I think that's absurd to say. I think we need to make this decision based on the people that are going to have to they're going to have to deal with the consequences of that decision. Should have a bigger say in the decision. If that's taking away people's rights, I guess it is, Wes, but I don't think it is. And you didn't want folks from out of state to be able to tell us what to do, and you have folks from out of state that are you're putting up to protest their permits all the time. You simply aren't credible, Wes. You've thrown your credibility away, and it's shameful. And
I'm not sure it's his credibility.
I do live in the district, and I have a question that if the petition was submitted and it didn't follow the rules, why was it even considered for a rule change? Because if I apply for a permit and I don't dot all the I's and cross all the T's, it's immediately thrown out.
Yeah, so the commission hasn't actually taken up the petition for action yet, so they'll meet again in May, and you know, they may decide not to move forward because it doesn't have all of the requirements that the rules require it to have, but I'm not sure what the commission might do.
If I can, one more. I know our position where we're at down there, and I know a lot of other people's position. You know, if we take away the water or shut the water down, not do this, how many jobs and how much economic loss is there actually in this community that's already struggling and challenged? You know, I know when we did any of the work we did down there on the Witcher, the Resco on the home side, we used local people. We bought sprinklers local, we bought pumps local. You know, the ditching company that we did, everybody was local. I told you, Hayden Outdoors, the guy that hired me when there's only 5 brokers, there's 220 now. Leo Hayden, he passed away. I was at his funeral last Thursday. On the way back, I went and stopped at a place, had breakfast or lunch, and there was a mom and pop restaurant. And I guarantee you, every time I go down the road, I try to go in and do that for those people, because when I was selling real estate, a lot on the road before coming in out here, all those mom and pop shops I used to stop from here to Missouri and Nebraska, 85% of them are closed now because, you know, COVID took care of them. So anyway, like I said, just need to think about the economic impact. And it needs to be addressed. If there is a water issue, we need to be responsible with the water, figure out what's right, but not just keep protesting every time, you know, somebody puts in a well permit or something like that. Be within the guidelines of the law, do what the law allows at that point in time. And, you know, some people are going to be more successful than other people, how they do things. A lot of these people are successful. They come from nothing, but they made something. They want to leave something for their children to go on and carry on with. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, every time I had to go down the road with a guy here a while back, and there's a guy drilling an oil well out there in the field. I said, well, it looks like that guy's getting well drilled. And he says, I hope he hits a big one. I hope it's really good for him and his family. He says, it's not going to affect me one bit, but it's going to affect him. And that's the way people's attitude need to get more in the area, as far as I'm concerned.
Won't the economic impact of closing it be the same impact that we had if we ran out of water?
The question is, won't the economic impact of closing it be the same as if we ran out of water?
Yeah, eventually, if there's no irrigation, then you're gonna have the same situation. You know, it's just a matter of if it happens now or if it happens in 100 years. And, you know, we've got a resource that's unfortunately really barely renewable, if it is. I mean, it's, as somebody pointed out, ancient water. And it's just a matter of choosing how long we want that to last. And I think that's something that's up for discussion, but I'd like to do it with folks that are going to rely on the facts, and they're going to rely on you know, the economic good of their neighbors, and be thinking about that while it's happening. You know, these wells aren't just good for the irrigator, because you saw back in our presentation, $280,000 increase in gross income, but $750,000 in economic activity. And that's what keeps, I can assure you, there would not be a John Deere dealership in this county if it weren't for irrigation now. And that's not to say that irrigation is going to go away if we close the basin. It's not going to immediately go away. But it's going to go away a lot further, and we'll have 16 million acre feet that will be a resource that stays buried forever. And I don't see why we shouldn't use that in a meaningful, rational, well thought out way.
I think I need to say again, nobody's trying to shut down any wells here. None of the existing wells would be affected even with this. I don't go so far as to say all the new capacity wells should be denied. I say it's some percentage should be. But nobody is trying to do away with new existing wells.
Jack,
Yes.
all of our wells have been protested by your bunch for final permits, and they're existing wells. So where's your argument?
Those are 50-year-old wells.
I
You're protesting
had
on the
no
permits.
idea what,
That's what
I guess I know anything about that.
Yeah, they're final permits and they're being protested by the lady that was sitting there that left.
So you're not talking about new appropriations?
No.
Really?
No, we protested every change in use
He's not the only one. Y'all really know
for
what
years
you're
and
talking
years.
about before you bring arguments up.
He's not the only one. Les has protested mine. And matter of fact, he went as far as he let some other wells pass, but protested ours.
Somebody down there has protested on behalf of Vilas, protested wells. On behalf of the Vilas city of Vilas.
Just for clarity, maybe I can describe that there's two different things happening. You know, we're talking about a rule change about closing the basin, and at the same time, for the last several years, new permits, new appropriations, and recently final permits have been objected to after their publication in the local paper. And so that goes through, you know, a separate process that hasn't been successful. The objections haven't been successful. The permits have been approved because they are going through the appropriate process, but there have been a lot of objections, and right now there are some final permits that have been objected, and so that puts them into this hearing process that is a delay. So, and it's costly.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it's costly because it tends to, people then hire lawyers. It is quite costly. So, but there's two different things. There's objections to new appropriations and final permits, and there's this rule change that we're talking about. But, you know, difficult things happening in this area, for sure.
I will say the connection that Curtis is trying to draw between those two is if they say we're not after existing wells now, and yet the same people are protesting existing wells from being used. They're trying to object to them, the permits of existing wells to be used.
Yes, I would learn that.
Yeah, well, it was in my presentation.
What is the ramifications with if you close the basin? And I'm not just saying for irrigation. If you close the basin, how's that going to affect stock wells, domestic wells, municipal wells? How's that work if you close the basin, I guess?
Would not impact domestic and stock wells. Small capacity wells would not be affected. Permits would continue to be. Municipal wells and irrigation wells, feedlot wells, dairy wells, any large processing plants required water, those would all be, we wouldn't have any new wells.
I think some clarification on that for everybody.
Hey, Jim, for a point of reference, would that boundary be like 15 to 16 gallons a minute well? Once you bumps you up into a livestock containment facility or dairy, anything less than 15 would be a domestic?
It's actually 50 gallons per minute for what we call small capacity wells. But also, you can't have a municipal small capacity well or an industrial small capacity well or an irrigation small capacity well. So, but 50 gallons per minute is the max for a small capacity well. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to know when the law changed that anybody could protest your well. Used to be, it was, if you had a well, you could not drill within a half a mile of an existing irrigation well. These are irrigation wells, or like we're talking about. Okay, so now, these people are protesting wells that are, they live 50 miles away. That's not going to affect them.
That was changed in 1969 in the Groundwater Management Act, which give us Title 37.
Why is it just now taking effect?
Yeah, Dixie, to explain that with facts, I'll do that. The rule hasn't changed. These objections are
legal, right?
Yeah, the objections are they don't have standing to object, and that's what they've tested over and over 70 times. Is the rule that says you have to have a high capacity well within half mile of this well permit in order to object. That's in the rules, it's been in the rules.
Which rule?
I don't know, I don't have it memorized until then, but it's in there.
I got it.
What rule is that?
Yeah,
Yeah, the rule for objectors is to have an objection that is adequate to be heard. You have to have a high capacity well within half mile of the permitted.
Where is that?
You know, Wes, I don't know. I'm not gonna play this game with you. That's the rule. It's been the rule forever. What they're doing, Dixie, is just ignoring that rule, going ahead and objecting, and they go through this entire process that costs the person filing the permit $7,500. Goes through that entire process just to continue to prove that that's the rule over and over again, 70-something times.
I will say, excuse me, just a moment, to that point, that since presumably Wes has read it, and he's right, since 1969, the ability to contest a well has been out there for basically anyone to make a contest. The difference is, up until just a few years ago, we were basically ruled, we ruled ourselves as responsible and ethical people, and it's just at that point that frivolous, unethical objections started coming in, with the sole purpose of costing other residents or the applicants more money. And it's been ruled that way, and we can hear about what the law is or what the law should be, but that has been handed down to the contesting group from first the hearing officer. He's the first one, the hearing officer for the Colorado Groundwater Commission. He hands down that ruling first and says it's a frivolous case, a frivolous contest. It then, if they so choose, goes to the commission. And it's been handed down from the commission to the contesting group that this is a frivolous case that has no basis. If they continue, it goes to the district court. Our own district court, Judge Brinkley, specifically, who also read the law and interpreted it as this is frivolous, unethical, and sentenced jail time based on it.
Did he use those words in his ruling?
You know, Wes, I wasn't there. You were the one there being sentenced to jail time, buddy. So
I'll bring it to you.
I've got a question. Isn't the Groundwater Commission's job to say whether or not the objection has followed the rules or is not acceptable or it doesn't merit consideration? Or is it your staff's job to do that? Or somebody that is operating on government money is.
You can look on their website. Their job is to protect and to conserve for future generations. Water is precious. They do that through the rules and the law. 37.
I'm talking about following the rules as far as objections.
Yeah, there's a whole set of rules.
If the objections do
if
not
they were followed,
comply
it would be
with the
different.
law, why is staff even considered? Or is the staff, or is it you guys on the board?
well, that's where it goes. It goes to staff.
At some point, you guys.
Maybe I could just explain briefly. So anyone is able to object to a publication, but what's been happening is that through motions for summary judgment, the hearing officer finds that the permits can be issued because they meet all the requirements of the rules and the statute. And so then the case goes away, but it's after we've had this legal battle, and we've had the same legal battle a number of times, and it continues to happen. And you know, objectors.
Successful. It's worth mentioning how many times that has been.
I don't think it's been. Yes, I don't think it's been successful, but you know, the law allows anyone to file an objection to a permit that's been published, and so we have gone through the same process a number of times, but it's a process. We have to follow the process, even though the outcome is likely to be the same.
Process,
proposed process shouldn't include, ignoring the rules if it's leading to frivolous claims.
Right, and so now I believe it was the district court did find that, one person here in the room can't file any more objections without being represented by an attorney. So that person is prevented from doing that because that has been problematic. But there are other people who are doing the same thing. So we're continuing to have the same process.
Why do you have to publicly put it in the paper for it?
Pardon me?
Why put it in the paper then? I don't understand that.
So that's just a requirement of statute and the rules that these appropriations require publication as to the final permit.
Right.
So if we wanted to stop that, we'd have to make a change to either the rules or statute.
It's in there so people can see it, to dispute it or whatever. That's why it's in there.
Right.
Right, Rusty, to answer your question, it's there for people with valid objections to be able to object.
It doesn't say that.
What's happened is, there's been these objections that have been found over 70 times by the hearing officer, through the appeals process, over 70 times to be frivolous. And they've been found by the Baca County Court to be frivolous.
It didn't say no privilege.
Tilden, I'm not going to argue semantics with you, man. Has it been successful?
It hasn't been.
Okay.
No.
And because
How many
everybody
more times do I
legal
get
Hey, folks. We're here.
It's cost me so much money.
This is definitely, been a difficult, ongoing situation, but, we'd like to get any further input about the proposed rule change. Any other questions that haven't been answered? Yes.
When you're doing a rule change, could the words high capacity crop irrigation wells be used to be distinguished from high capacity municipal wells?
Yeah, so the question was, in a rule change, could we distinguish between high capacity irrigation or municipal wells? So if you wanted to suggest a different rule that distinguished the two, I think you could ask for that rule change procedurally. Yes. Yes.
What's driving, I missed the very beginning, what's driving this rule change? Who is the catalyst of this, proposal?
Okay. No. So what's driving the rule change? We did receive a petition from a group in the area wanting to close the basins. We received a request for a rule change. The commission has not yet decided if they want to act on the request.
And do they have to specifically speak to the wording of that petition, or can they come up with, is it within their authority to come up with a modified response that really meets the needs of a broader population? Or is it specific to that petition that they have to respond?
So I think the commission would be acting on the specific request, which was a complete closure, but during that hearing process, I do think that the commission could consider alternatives to a complete closure. I think the commission would be happy to.
They could move in on something that would be a modified outcome in that same hearing, or does it have to then go to a new beginning and start over?
I think that they could eventually end up with a rule that is different from a complete closure, but that would just require the input of people with a different perspective during that hearing process to suggest, different alternatives.
And informally, this is part of that process, because they're here to hear us with some ideas that we might have about what we agree or disagree with about that proposal. Is that somewhat what this meeting is for?
I think that's somewhat what this meeting is for, but if the rulemaking were to begin and nobody suggested something different during the rulemaking itself, then I don't know that there would be a way for an alternative to.
They would cook it up themselves. They got to hear it from
Right.
their representatives of the people.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we started the meeting with, is that the commission would like to understand what the community wants. Because you have one commissioner from the area and they are from the rest of the state, so they would like to know what it is that you all want for this resource that is local. So
I have one question.
Yes.
If you do consider this group's petition and you decide not to go forward with it, are we going to continue to deal with this BS that we're dealing with?
So it would be the commission deciding to go ahead with it or not. I'm not on the commission, I'm just, the staff. I don't know if we will continue to see objections.
If you decide not to close the basin and you don't consider the petition, what are our options for stopping this?
What are the options for stopping? I don't have a good answer for what the options are for stopping because it's different people continue to object unless there's a change in that process of the publication of permits and the way that objections are allowed. And just looking at my team to see if, there would have to be some kind of change.
Another petition put in for a rule change that says if somebody's going to object, that they have to follow certain other rules, like pay money.
Yeah, that might be possible. I think right now they pay $10. I'm not sure if it's in rule or in statute that we're following. Just looking at my team. It's in both. So I think, that's a possibility to change the rules so that there's a different standard for objecting.
I think there ought to be a penalty for those who object to the rules. I feel about that, but they get some skin in their game as well. I think that would change a lot of that. There ought to be maybe we need to put some kind of petition for going forward in a statute or something within the deal there that there is, if it is discarded, that it is just a grievance. It was costing us $7,500. It's costing $10. It's not fair.
So that seems to be kind of the theme right now. And I will tell you this. I personally was part of a group that asked for attorney fees to be paid, and it was not granted, and that's the hearing officer's right to do. But I will say that is an option, to ask for attorney fees. And the more times it comes up, the more likely it is to be granted. Just the more times you knock on that door, the more likely it's going to open. And that's, that would be the solution to what you're speaking of right now. And I'm guessing if someone had to pay more than $10 to contest your well, they might think twice about it. They might not. I don't know. But I don't see what they're standing to gain even from their $10. But anyhow, that would be the solution. Would be you always have that option to ask the hearing officer for attorney costs and fees.
I've said that for years in all even civil cases, everything else. If somebody's going to come sue you that doesn't have a rightful cause and they find him wrong, why shouldn't he pay my fees to defend myself if he's the one that they dismissed the case on?
Right, and that's always out there, and you never know if you will be awarded attorney fees or not. But at some point,
vice versa, you stand his. If you're arguing wrong, you stand his attorney fees.
Yeah.
That way
we're standing it, aren't we?
We get all the lawyers out of here about half.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
I did leave cards back if anyone wants to consider the Chinese down in the southeast Baca County, or anybody that wants to sell irrigated ground after tonight's meeting.
Kerry, are you personally Chinese?
What's that?
I said, are you personally Chinese?
Yes.
Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.
I don't. Oh, yeah. Oh, probably not. I'm nice to meet you. Absolutely.
You walked a very fine tightrope. You did a great job. Happy
Is this on? So real quick, are there any representatives from LGS here tonight? Please send in your surveys at the back.
What's that? It's been sold. I've been to the property. I've sold it 3 times. They've been paying me to manage all 3 buyers. Finally got it. So they called it Impact County. It went to office and so, yeah. Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. I do.
You got, yes, you are in some way. I'll ask you guys to stand in the chair. I'll make sure. If folks in the audience wouldn't mind stacking up some of these chairs, it'll save us some time getting all these back into the room. So before you head out, if you could stack a few chairs for us, it'd be greatly appreciated. Yeah, I think Tracy has a card. We have a card. We'll always defer. So we've got
Thank you.